I want it, want it, want it. Fast internet, stay connected in the jet. Wi-Fi podcast, blasting out an SMS. Text me and I'll text you back. Check me on the app chat. All about that HTTP, you're a PC, I'm a Mac.
From cell phones to computers, technology has become a pervasive and some would argue necessary aspect of our lives. But are we paying a price? Joining me now to discuss this very hot topic is Dr. Luis Almeida, Interim Department Chair of Integrated Marketing Communications, Multimedia Journalism, and Media Production at Jackson State University. Welcome. And your title is a mouthful, Dr. Almeida.
Yeah, there it is, Dwain.
So, talk to me, Dr. Almeida, about, or I'll call you Luis, if you don't mind. Luis, talk to us about technology and how big a part of our lives it is now.
Well, technology is part of our lives in the 21st century, without question. I don't think we can live without technology. And in fact, we are so attached to technology because of the advancements that we have seen in latest years that their lives are interconnected with it.
And you have argued, you've come up with the term, you've coined a new term called technomoderation. Tell me what that is.
Well, technomoderation is exactly what the term means, Dwain. Is basically the use of technology moderation. Is a call to action, in fact, for all of us to be paying attention to how much technology we use on a daily basis.
I remember my cousin telling me, her daughter who was in high school, she had several of her friends over to the house, and she goes down into the basement. There must have been 7 of them. Mm-hmm. They were all on their phones. Like, they weren't talking to each other directly. They were talking to each other on their devices and doing other things. Yeah,
exactly. Now, this is one of the things that we have to be paying attention to when it comes to human communication and some of the years that we have been doing this type of human communication and the changes that are occurring today in our society and trying to, rather than having like a conversation with one of your friends, with your family members, now all of a sudden we're behind a screen, right? Trying to do communications, but at the same time, is that really real communication?
Let me answer that question. I would argue yes. And on some level, it is real.
To a degree, sure.
Right. But what do you mean when you would argue it's not real?
Well, it isn't real in the sense that whenever we're having communications face-to-face, like what we're having right now, so I can actually have a conversation with Dwain, and I can see your facial expressions, I can see some of the empathy, some of the emotion that you're sharing but when we actually on a computer and behind a computer screen, those are difficult things to actually capture in human communication. Sometimes, well, I don't think it's a good idea. Maybe it's my own bias.
There are a lot of people who are arguing what you're saying now that technology. I really read an interesting article about this in relation to intimacy, and especially young girls feel that it's harder to find intimacy. It's easy to find relationships, maybe even sexual relationships, but it's hard to find intimacy. Yeah. And I guess you're saying that it's all this technology that's making us less intimate?
I think so. I think that intimacy is just a part of it. But think about the rates of divorces, they're increasing. Lately on ABC, we heard a documentary on this, on the importance of paying attention how we communicate online and the rates of divorces, they're increasing. So the question of intimacy
and there's
is
a correlation. Yeah. They're saying there's a correlation between this rise in the divorce rate and this you would argue overuse of technology.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
Well, let me stay away from my computer. I'm scared, Dr. Almeida. I'm scared.
Well, we need to pay attention to these things. Like anything, if you think about it, if we take, if you drink 15 glasses of water in a period of 2 hours, we're going to get sick, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, you think about it. If we're on a computer for 15, 16 hours a day, all of a sudden now we're not having those face-to-face communications that we're having right now, and then because we are so ingrained with computer technology, now we don't have the opportunity to speak with a personal, intimate level. Those are some problematic, some consequences that comes out of it.
Right, and what's even more interesting, if you take this to its logical conclusion, there are many kids who grow up with technology. I see a lot of parents now giving iPads or the phone to the kid, and they shut up right away. They're not crying anymore. But I wonder, it's one thing to have known how to have a quote-unquote normal conversation, but if you never learned that, if all of your interactions basically are from technology, what's that going to do to a person who never really knew how to have another kind of conversation?
Well, interpersonal skills are going to suffer because of that, and that's really not that complicated to understand. There's a logical conclusion out of this, but I think that the new generation of Americans are going to have a problem with interacting with folks and be able to have or carry conversations and things like this. And some of us who are a little older, we had some of those experiences in the past that we did not grow up necessarily just by talking through text messaging. We can actually carry a conversation, have a cool communication in a public place or even here in your show, right?
Another phenomena that's occurring is binging. I must admit, Dr. Almeida, Luis, I've indulged in the binging, and I wonder if the more that this technology becomes on demand, does it draw us further into it? I don't have to wait for this show to come on next week or whatever. I can have it when I want it.
Well, I think this is already happening to a large scale, and I guess the sense of urgency is actually being delayed by the opportunities that the technology is giving us. And to some degree, this is actually a good thing. I think we can, for example, now we're live, and we have some folks here from Brazil I can see here on the feed, and a friend of mine from Egypt who are in fact being a part of the show, and I think that's wonderful. But then now, I think it's the positive of the technology. Now maybe some of our friends and some of the folks here at WGSU are going to be able to see the feed maybe later and see, I think those are actually good things. But it becomes problematic when we all of a sudden just stop from doing some of the face-to-face or the live communications that sometimes we should be having in the first place, right? So, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, Dwain.
Well,
I'm going to challenge you there on that one.
Okay, well, I love it. I mean, but I love my on-demand. Look, I'm gonna be real with you, Luis, but I do wonder, we're going to talk about this later on the show too, where this is leading to, because we only know the technology we know, and it is really expanding rapidly. People hooking up everything in their house to technology. You can control things from your phone. And I don't think in our lifetime we'll be going back, but we know they're starting to embed technology. I hear Google glasses are now Google in your eyeball. They're about to put a device in your eyeball. So we've got a lot to discuss. We've got a couple more guests joining us. We'll be right back.
I want it, fast internet, stay connected in the jet, Wi-Fi podcast, blasting out an SMS, text me and I'll text you back, check me on that iChat, I'm all about that HTTP, you're a PC, I'm a Mac.
Got an unwanted car, truck, motorcycle, camper, or boat to donate to Cool Jazz 88.5? Pickup is arranged and it's tax deductible. For more information, visit us at wjsu.org. Most vehicles are welcome. Don't hesitate. Donate to Cool Jazz 88.5.
Hello, this is Zach Harmon.
Hey everybody, this is Smoking Joe Quebec from the Lone Star State of Texas.
Hey folks, this is Sean Chambers.
Hi, this is Albert Castilla.
This is Reverend Peyton with Reverend Peyton's Big Band Band.
Hello everybody, this is Joe Lewis Walker, the Boss Talker, saying don't listen to part-time, sometimes listen to full-time blues.
Proud to be the home for new and independent blues music. Catch Full-Time Blues Radio, Sundays at 6 a.m. on Cool and Current, WJSU.
But she blinded me with science. She blinded me with science.
Welcome back. Are we being blinded by science and technology? We've been talking with Dr. Luis Almeida, and joining us now by phone is Dr. Galen Marshall, who is a professor of medicine and pediatrics at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, and our own WJSU correspondent, DeRay Fogg, with that other generation. Speaking out, you can speak up for your generation.
I'm here to speak on our behalf.
And your addiction to technology. Okay, so I want to read something. This is from a study that came out at the University of Illinois in March, and it says, is cell phone use detrimental to mental health? A new study from the University of Illinois finds that addiction to mobile technology is linked to anxiety and depression in college-age students. Dr. Marshall, are you there?
Yes, I am.
So what do you say about that? Can this technology be bad for our health?
Well, I think that it's a complex answer, but the simple answer is yes, it can be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. There are diverse studies in the literature. Some say that just being plugged in, like Dr. Almeida was talking about, is detrimental to your health. There are others who suggest that, in point of fact, people that are Facebook participants, interestingly, particularly female, tend to have less stress because they're plugged in, they have friends, they have acquaintances, and they get much of their information from there. What I study at UMC is how the mind affects the immune system, and particularly how things like chronic anxiety and stress and depression can affect the immune system. And the things that our research and others have shown is that what seems to buffer those effects are things like community and family and optimism. And different people seem to interact in social media in different ways. For some people, as they become addicted to it, it's like any other type of addiction. They can't stop even though they might want to. That probably has a negative effect on their mindset, and that downstream effect can be negative on their health. Other people who use it to connect and interact and have a sense of community from it, it can actually be a positive thing for them. But the key to that, I believe, is moderation. Someone who's on from the time they get up to the time they go to bed is probably not someone who's using it in the optimal way.
And is it always going to be correlated to the amount of time the person spends on the device? Because suppose, say I'm a parent, I'm looking to see if my child may be at a dangerous point with this technology use, and it's not the amount of time, but it's that he has no other friends. He's just always interacting with technology. Is that something that one might look for?
Absolutely, and I think part of the reason for that is go back to the idea of the fundamental concept of community. When I heard you all discussing earlier about going into a room and seeing all these young people all on their cell phones, not looking at each other, not talking to each other. There are those who argue that that's its own community, but then there are those of us, and I think it demands rigorous study to prove this, but it's intuitively sensible that if you're not interacting with one another to some degree, if you're sitting in the same room and you never look at one another and you never interact verbally, you're only texting or things like that, that has the potential to have adverse social consequences, and it would be those adverse social consequences that we would be most likely to expect would have health results.
Wow. DeRay, do you ever witness that kind of thing going on where people are spending more time with the device than with the person they're with?
Of course. I'm a substitute teacher, sometimes, and when you're in there, and it's like the younger that the generation get, like the younger I see people, the more you see them interacting through, social media or anything of that nature. Where they're like you said, they're sitting right next. And I thought that was the craziest thing, because you see 3-4 students sitting right next to each other, and they say, "Do you see such happen right here on this, or do you see this happening on that?" He was like, "You all are right next to each other. Why do you need to be on this this device?" So,
well, I guess though. Through time, each generation there have been new developments, and people have adopted them. Louise and Dr. Marshall, are either one of you worried, or could this all work out for the best? You know, that we'll somehow learn to deal with all this technology in a healthy way, or is there something to be worried about long term?
Well, I'll jump in and start first, and then we'll let Dr. Amanda comment as well. One of the things that I've seen in my 30-plus year history as a clinical scientist is that the human body is made in a very resilient fashion. We can endure a lot, and we were made that way, but it takes time to adapt. And the rapidity with which we're seeing the technology change and this social interactions change as a result, are so rapid that I believe that the body does not have a time to adapt, not only individually, but societally. And let me give you one little medical fact that goes along with that. As technology has exploded, in 1970, in what would be very much a pre-technology era of what we're talking about now, the incidence or prevalence of allergic disease in the United States was about 10%. Only about 1 in 10 people had allergies. By the year 2013, 1 in 3 had allergies. And it looks like that number is continuing to increase. Now, association doesn't prove causation. We can't say because people are on their cell phone or their smartphone too much, they're more likely to be allergic. But where there's smoke, if you look carefully enough, there's usually fire. And studies are going on now to try to address that, because the changes that occur in the immune system that make someone allergic are similar to the ones that we see in the laboratory that are associated with high levels of stress that are now also in the literature associated with individuals that are very plugged into social media. So you can draw a line through it, and it is a concern, though it's not yet certainly a proven concern.
Well, I'm a little more on. I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be positive with this, but
just speak your mind.
I don't know. I'm a little more skeptical. I think that some of the things that we're seeing today in terms of behavior, I don't think that folks are really seeing what's happening to them. If we go back again to the studies of Marshall McLuhan and some of the theories that he was talking about in the 60s, I don't think that is really that different than today. Now, the tools have changed. I think that the times that McLuhan was talking about understanding meaning extensions of man and the mechanical bride and all those cool works within the communications field. We are different. We're not living in a world of media anymore. We live in a world of multimedia. And
what would be the difference then between what you're calling traditional media and multimedia?
Well, it's access. If you look at the access and the amount of media that we have available in our hands today versus what we actually seen in the past is significant. So I guess that and some of the things that we have been investigating, it verifies that, because now the impacts of the new media technology is really having some significant side effects on how we actually behave. And I think that in the future, as media progresses and gets a little more sophisticated, we're going to see more of those side effects.
Well, we're going to take a little dive into the future. We're going to speculate where this all may be leading. We'll be right back. We're talking technology on the full spectrum. Stick around.
Hey there, this is pianist Janice Friedman, and you're listening to 88.5 on your FM dial, WJSU.org online.
Support of this program is made in part by Griffith Financial Services, helping Jacksonians with their retirement and life plans, as well as critical, chronic, and terminal illness protection. Griffith Financial Services is available at 800-361-6542 or griffithfinancialservices.com. For a consultation today, the More tab is at your fingertips.
Welcome back. We've been talking with Jackson State University's Dr. Luis Almeida, the University of Mississippi Medical Center's Dr. Galen Marshall, and WJSU's DeRay Fogg. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, you know what? I've got a couple of things I want to say now, but I'm only human. Of flesh and blood I'm made. But let's go back, though, because I mentioned earlier, Google is thinking of coming up with a device that they would implant into your eyeball. It's Google Glasses 3.0 or whatever. Yeah. And you were talking about this a little bit, Dr. Marshall. What happens when this technology is actually embedded into the flesh?
It's a fascinating question, and I think that anytime I happen to come from the school of thought that it's pretty hard to improve on the basics of a normal, healthy human being. We were designed with a pretty good set of parameters, and to communicate with one another or to use this to gather information and data that would somehow alter how we're going to behave has to do with the rapidity of this. If this was done over years and years and years and years, there might be some adaptation that would be appropriate. There might be someone, say if someone were blind and you could help them where they could now see, that's one thing. But if you're going to now start embedding things into individuals so that they will have data even more instantly available than what's necessary to take the phone out of their pocket, I see that as a potentially a real problem as it relates to human health.
And yet, Dr. Marshall, it feels to me like it's an inevitability. It's going to happen. The marketplace is calling for it, and DeRay, it seems. And it's not fair to just say your generation. I love my technology too, but it seems you guys have a different relationship with it.
Well, it's something. This is how I look at it. When I was like 3 or 4 years old, parents were, he could play with the remote, he could turn the TV on. Like I never thought such could do that. When you all were coming up, it was probably
careful.
Right, I'm trying. I don't know exactly but I'm pretty. But as you get older, the generations get older, and the technology is different.
Yeah. So you look at 3-year-olds today.
Right.
They can tell me how to do things with my.
Yeah, I have a 5-year-old cousin, and my mom, she gave her the phone, so she's looking at the phone. She said, I don't know if before you knew it, she found an app, she found this, she done bought something and all, like she knew but they know how to maneuver it.
Right.
So, and then you look at everything, like a lot of the toys now, and it's cultivate. It's so much primed into our into our society.
Right. That's exactly right.
Is there any, Luis? Is there any upside to this?
I think so. I think that even early in the show they were talking about the fact that technology allows us to be able to share those messages later on. And adapt to our lifestyles. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think that technology is a great thing. If we think about technologies in the classroom and helping folks to be able to learn content in different learning styles, I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, but let me ask you this. How are your students' writing skills?
Well, that's the side effect of using too much technology. This is why some of us within the education technology field, we pay attention to some of the instructional strategies that we plan in a class to make sure that folks have the opportunity to actually do both what we call the analog learning and the technical learning.
Dr. Marshall, the field of medicine, you guys are always on the lookout for new fields. Is this a developing area of expertise now?
Yes, it's actually, I happen to be someone that's called a psychoneuroimmunologist, and that is I study how the mind affects the immune system going through this. Within the context of that are people that recognize the pros and cons of social media as it evolves, and are actually, they spend their time studying and publishing the data as it relates to the positive and negative aspects of social media on health itself. I expect that field in our area, I expect that field to grow, not to get any smaller.
And talking about statistical trending, is it looking, ominous might be too strong a word, but troublesome?
I think troublesome is a very fair word. But if you think about it, it's like everything else in technology development. Technology in and of itself is not the problem. It's what we do with it, and it's how we use it. And I think the idea that there are new inventions that make our communications more and more and more effective, they're not the problem. The problem are how we use it, how we train our children to use this. That the idea that a 3-year-old can work an iPad better than I can is, on one side, kind of humorous and a little embarrassing to me, but on the other side, then have we robbed that 3-year-old of certain childhood things that you and I grew up with, maybe different, but we grew up with, that helped make us and mold us into the people that we've become today.
Right, and I have one more quick question for you. Does the technology actually expedite the evolution of the body? I mean, could 3-year-olds actually being born now be better equipped to deal with technology?
I think it's a very interesting question, and the short answer to that would be that was something you'd have to answer over decades and centuries, because the body doesn't change that rapidly. It changes over time. But if indeed you're changing the gene expression of an individual by their exposure to certain kinds of social media, that person grows up and has a child, and that person grows up and have a child. Over generations, most certainly you can change some of their characteristics.
Well, Dr. Almeida, what advice do you have for people in terms of you're the techno-moderator here. Like, what is a healthy level? If you could just briefly say, what do you think is a healthy relationship with technology?
Well, I think that when folks wake up in the morning, let's try to go and do our daily activities in moderation. So rather than waking up in the morning and straight going to get your cell phone and check social media, let's do the right.
Well, you're asking a lot there.
I know, but this is why we're talking technomoderation, right? And then we'll go through our daily lives, and depending which type of profession we have, we may need to use technology a little more than others. But then after the work hours are done, about 6:30, we put the cell phone away, and we're going to have those conversations with your family, maybe sit down for a good dinner and things like this.
And Dwain, I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. Do you spend more time talking on the phone or texting on the phone?
I rather text, but the thing is, I enjoy face-to-face conversation more than anything. I don't like talking on the phone.
You answered my question. That's not a bad thing. I want to thank, this was a really great conversation. I'm sorry we only had this much time. I want to thank our guest, Dr. Luis Almeida, Interim Department Chair of Integrated Marketing Communications, Multimedia Journalism, and Media Production at Jackson State University, and Dr. Galen Marshall, Professor of Medicine and Pediatrics at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, and of course, WJSU's DeRay Fogg. I want to thank you all so much. That's our show for today. Don't forget to catch Metro Morning Live tomorrow morning at 7 and 10 on JSU TV, Comcast Channel 14. And join me again tomorrow at 4 for the full spectrum. Up next, Latin Jazz with Dale Morris.